The resignation letter sat on my desk like a loaded gun, waiting for the right moment to fire. 3 years I'd been chasing that regional director position at Summit Horizon Tech, and tonight I finally understood why it kept slipping through my fingers like smoke. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Oliver Shaw, and I used to believe in loyalty. Used to think hard work meant something. Used to trust my wife. The clock on my kitchen wall ticked past midnight as I sat in the dark, laptop glowing, staring at the email thread that shattered my world. Miranda's company account, the one she thought was private, the one she forgot to log out of on our shared home computer. Technology has a funny way of exposing the truth when people get careless. Working late with Rachel again, she'd texted me at 9. The same Rachel Connors who'd waltzed into Summit 6 months ago with her perfect smile and designer suits. The same Rachel who somehow knew every detail of my promotion strategy, every angle I'd been working for years. The front door clicked open. Miranda's heels tapped across the hardwood like a countdown timer. "Ollie, you still up?" Her voice carried that forced casualness she used when lying. I closed the laptop and turned on the kitchen light. Miranda stood in the doorway, still beautiful at 32, still the ambitious woman I'd married 5 years ago. But tonight, I saw the cracks in her armor. Lipstick slightly smudged, blouse wrinkled, that telltale flush she got when she was nervous. "How was your meeting?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She dropped her purse on the counter, avoiding my eyes. "Long. Boring. You know how Rachel gets when she's stressed about the quarterly reports." Rachel. Always Rachel these days. "Must have been some meeting. You missed dinner. Again." Miranda sighed, running her fingers through her perfectly styled blonde hair. "I know, and I'm sorry. This promotion has everyone on edge. The board is breathing down our necks about the expansion project." The promotion. My promotion. The one I'd designed from the ground up, complete with market analysis, staffing projections, and a 5-year growth plan that would revolutionize our New England operations. "Speaking of promotions," I said carefully, "any word on the regional director position?" Her shoulders tensed, almost imperceptibly. "The board is still reviewing candidates. These things take time." Lies. All lies. I'd seen the email thread between her and Rachel, the one where they discussed how to manage Oliver's expectations and transition his ideas to Rachel's leadership style, the one where my own wife called me too comfortable in his current role and lacking the vision for executive responsibility. "I'm sure they are," I said. Miranda kissed my forehead, a quick, distracted peck. "I'm exhausted. Going to shower and crash." I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the bathroom door closing, the shower starting. Then I opened my laptop again and read through the emails one more time, each word cutting deeper than the last. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how methodical it had been. How Miranda and Rachel had systematically dismantled my chances while pretending to support me. How they'd taken my ideas, my strategies, my 3 years of groundwork and handed it all to Rachel like a gift. But the emails revealed something else, something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just about business. The messages between Miranda and Rachel were too familiar, too intimate. Inside jokes, shared secrets, references to our special project that had nothing to do with quarterly reports. And then there were the photos. I'd found them buried in Miranda's cloud storage, mixed in with legitimate work files. Pictures of her and Rachel at restaurants I'd never heard of, at a weekend conference that Miranda claimed was boring and mandatory. Pictures of them laughing, touching, looking at each other the way Miranda used to look at me. My wife wasn't just sabotaging my career, she was having an affair. The shower stopped upstairs. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, feeling something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Miranda thought she was so clever, playing the supportive wife while stabbing me in the back. Rachel thought she could waltz in and steal everything I'd worked for. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. The Summit Horizon Tech headquarters squatted like a glass and steel monument to corporate ambition on the edge of Millbrook, our quaint New England town that tried desperately to maintain its charm despite the tech invasion. I'd helped design the expansion that brought companies like Summit here, back when I believed in progress and partnerships. Now, walking through the pristine lobby at 8:30 sharp, I felt like I was entering enemy territory. "Morning, Oliver," chirped Jessica from reception, her smile bright and oblivious. "Big day today, huh? Executive meeting at 9. "Big day indeed," I replied, adjusting my tie. I'd chosen my best suit this morning, navy blue with a subtle pinstripe. If I was going down, I'd do it with style. The elevator carried me to the executive floor, where Miranda ruled as CEO with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. She'd built Summit's New England division from nothing, and I'd been proud of her success. Used to be proud anyway. The boardroom buzzed with the usual pre-meeting energy. Regional managers, department heads, and senior staff clustered around the coffee station, discussing weekend plans and quarterly projections. I poured myself a cup of coffee and took my usual seat at the long mahogany table. Miranda entered at exactly 9 o'clock, commanding the room's attention without saying a word. She wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. "Good morning, everyone," she said, settling at the head of the table. "We have several important announcements today, so let's get started." Rachel slipped in just behind her, looking radiant in a burgundy dress that complemented her dark hair. She caught my eye and smiled, the same warm smile she'd been giving me for months while plotting my downfall. "First item," Miranda continued, consulting her tablet, "the regional director position for our expanded New England operations." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. 3 years of work, countless overtime hours, strategies and projections and presentations. My moment. After careful consideration and extensive review, the board has selected someone who embodies the fresh perspective and innovative thinking we need for this crucial role. I straightened in my chair, preparing to accept graciously, to thank the team, to outline my vision for the region's future. "Congratulations to Rachel Connors, our new regional director." The words hit me like a physical blow. Around the table, polite applause erupted. Rachel stood, her cheeks flushed with what looked like genuine surprise, though I now knew better. "Thank you so much," Rachel said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm honored by this opportunity and excited to implement the comprehensive growth strategy we've developed. I believe our 5-year expansion plan, focusing on sustainable growth and community partnerships, will revolutionize how tech companies integrate with traditional New England values." Every word was mine. Every concept, every phrase, every strategic element, lifted directly from the presentation I'd been perfecting for months. She delivered it flawlessly, as if she'd conceived every detail herself. The applause continued. Miranda beamed with pride. Several colleagues leaned over to congratulate Rachel personally. I sat frozen, coffee growing cold in my hands, watching my career implode in real time. "Oliver," Miranda said, her voice cutting through the congratulatory noise, "as our most experienced logistics coordinator, you'll be working closely with Rachel to ensure a smooth transition. Your institutional knowledge will be invaluable." Institutional knowledge. A polite way of saying I'd be training my replacement, teaching her the finer points of the job that should have been mine. "Of course," I managed, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Whatever the company needs." The meeting continued with budget discussions and project updates, but I heard none of it. I watched Miranda and Rachel exchange meaningful glances, saw the way Rachel's hand briefly touched Miranda's arm when she passed behind her chair, saw the small, satisfied smile that played at the corners of my wife's mouth. They thought they'd won. Thought they'd played me perfectly. They had no idea the game was just beginning. When the meeting finally ended, I remained seated as the room emptied. Rachel approached, her expression a masterful blend of sympathy and excitement. "Oliver, I hope you know how much I value your expertise," she said, settling into the chair beside me. "I'm going to need your guidance to make this transition successful." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd stolen my job with my own wife's help, who was now asking for my cooperation in my own professional execution. "Rachel," I said finally, "you're absolutely right about needing guidance. In fact, I think it's time I provided some clarity for everyone." I stood and walked to the front of the nearly empty boardroom, where Miranda was gathering her papers. A few stragglers remained, department heads discussing implementation timelines, senior staff planning follow-up meetings. "Miranda," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I have an announcement of my own." She looked up, eyebrows raised in mild curiosity. "What is it, Oliver?" I pulled out my phone and opened my email app, then connected to the room's presentation screen. My resignation letter appeared in crisp, professional font for everyone to see. "Effective immediately, I'm resigning from Summit Horizon Tech," I announced. "I'm also copying the entire board of directors on this decision, along with a detailed summary of my reasons." The room fell silent. Miranda's face went white, then flushed red as she realized the implications. Rachel stood frozen by the table, her mouth slightly open. "Oliver," Miranda said carefully, "don't you think we should discuss this privately?" "I think 3 years of private discussions have been quite enough," I replied. I clicked send, and the resignation officially entered the digital record. I'm sure Rachel will do an excellent job implementing her innovative strategies. After all, great minds think alike. I gathered my jacket and briefcase, nodding politely to the stunned faces around me. It's been educational working with all of you, truly educational. As I walked toward the door, I heard Miranda's sharp intake of breath, saw Rachel's panicked expression in my peripheral vision. The whispers started before I reached the elevator. By noon, the entire company would know that Oliver Shaw had quit without notice, immediately after being passed over for promotion. By evening, people would start asking questions about why the company's most dedicated employee had suddenly walked away. And that was exactly what I wanted them wondering. The Driftwood Bar sat on the edge of Millbrook's old fishing district, a weathered testament to the town's maritime past that somehow survived the tech invasion. Dark wood, brass fixtures, and the lingering scent of salt air made it feel like a sanctuary from the glass and steel corporate world I'd just abandoned. Troy Brennan, the owner and my oldest friend, looked up from polishing glasses as I walked in at 2 p.m, still wearing my resignation suit. "Well, well," he said, his Irish accent thickened by 20 years in Massachusetts, but still unmistakable. "Either you got promoted or you got fired, and judging by that look, it wasn't the promotion." "Neither," I said, settling onto my usual bar stool. "I quit." Troy's hands stilled on the glass. "You quit Summit? After 3 years of chasing that director job?" "They gave it to someone else, someone who apparently had better qualifications." "Better qualifications than you?" Troy snorted. "You designed half their expansion strategy. Hell, you helped bring them to Millbrook in the first place." He poured 2 fingers of Jameson without being asked, the good stuff he kept behind the bar for emergencies and celebrations. This felt like both. "That's what I thought too," I said, taking a sip. The whiskey burned, but it was a clean burn, honest and straightforward. Unlike my wife. "So what's the real story? You don't quit jobs over hurt feelings, Ollie. You're too practical for that." I stared into my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light from the windows. Outside, Millbrook's main street bustled with its usual afternoon activity. Tourists browsing antique shops, locals grabbing coffee, tech workers like me escaping their corporate cages for lunch. "The real story is that my wife orchestrated the whole thing," I said finally. "Miranda and her new best friend Rachel conspired to steal my job, my ideas, and apparently each other. Troy's eyebrows shot up. Miranda's having an affair? With the woman who got my promotion, using my own strategies. I took another sip. They've been planning this for months. I saw the emails, Troy. Every detail of my downfall, mapped out like a business plan. Jesus. Troy leaned against the bar, processing this information. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Janine. Heard through the grapevine you made some waves today. Coffee tomorrow? I have information you need. Janine worked as a paralegal at Morrison & Associates, the law firm that handled Summit's corporate contracts. She'd never liked Miranda, claimed she could smell the ambition from across a room. I'd always thought she was being dramatic. I'm going to figure out exactly how deep this goes, I said, typing back a quick yes to Janine. And then I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. Troy poured himself a shot and raised his glass. To the truth, then, and to making sure it comes out in the most inconvenient way possible. We drank to that, and I felt the first stirring of something that wasn't quite hope, but wasn't despair either. It was colder than hope, sharper than anger. It was purpose. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Miranda. We need to talk. Come home. I showed the message to Troy, who grimaced. The Queen summons. Let her wait, I said. I'm not her employee anymore. I'm not even sure I'm her husband. But as the afternoon wore on and the whiskey worked its way through my system, I knew I'd have to face her eventually. The house we'd bought together, the life we'd built, the marriage I'd thought was solid. It was all contaminated now, poisoned by her betrayal. At 5 o'clock, I finally drove home through Millbrook's tree-lined streets, past the white colonial houses and manicured lawns that made the town look like a postcard. Our house sat at the end of Maple Street, a renovated Victorian that Miranda had insisted we buy because it projected success. Her BMW was in the driveway, along with a silver Audi I didn't recognize. I found them in the living room, Miranda pacing by the fireplace, Rachel perched on the edge of our leather sofa like she belonged there. Both looked up when I entered, their expressions carefully composed. Oliver, Miranda said, her CEO voice in full effect, we need to discuss what happened today. We? I looked pointedly at Rachel. I wasn't aware this was a group conversation. Rachel is here as a friend, Miranda said. She's concerned about how your resignation might affect team morale. Team morale. As if my 3 years of dedication meant nothing compared to maintaining workplace harmony for the woman who'd stolen my job. How thoughtful, I said, settling into my favorite armchair. I'm touched by her concern. Rachel leaned forward, her dark eyes earnest and sympathetic. Oliver, I want you to know that I had no idea you were interested in the regional director position. If I had known... You would have what? I interrupted. Turn down the job? Decline to implement the 5-year growth strategy you presented so eloquently this morning? A flush crept up her neck. I don't know what you mean. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Rachel, that presentation was word for word from my development notes. The sustainable growth model, the community partnership framework, even the phrase about traditional New England values, all mine. Miranda stepped forward. Oliver, you're being paranoid. Multiple people contributed to that strategy. Multiple people, I repeated. Like you and Rachel, working late together, having all those private meetings, building such a close friendship. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. Miranda's jaw tightened, and Rachel's hands clenched in her lap. I think, I said finally, it's time for Rachel to leave. This conversation is between husband and wife. Rachel looked at Miranda, some silent communication passing between them. Then she stood, smoothing her skirt. Of course, she said. Miranda, call me later? Miranda nodded, and I watched Rachel gather her purse and walk to the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at me with something that might have been pity or might have been guilt. For what it's worth, Oliver, you're a good man. You deserve better. After she left, Miranda and I stared at each other across the living room that suddenly felt like a battlefield. Well, I said, are we going to keep pretending, or are we going to talk about what's really happening here? Miranda's composure finally cracked. What do you want me to say, Oliver? That I'm sorry you didn't get the promotion? Fine, I'm sorry. But you can't just quit without notice and embarrass me in front of the entire executive team. Embarrass you? I stood up, anger finally breaking through my careful control. Miranda, you sabotaged my career. You gave my job to your girlfriend and used my own ideas to justify it, and you're worried about embarrassment? She's not my girlfriend, Miranda snapped. She's a colleague and a friend. A friend you take photos with at romantic restaurants. A friend you share hotel rooms with at conferences. A friend you discuss our marriage with in intimate detail. Her face went white. You've been reading my emails. Your emails that you left open on our shared computer, your cloud storage that you forgot to secure, your entire digital affair laid out like a road map. Miranda sank onto the sofa, her hands shaking. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, human. Then the mask slipped back into place. It's not what you think, she said. Then tell me what it is. Tell me why my wife and the woman who stole my job are planning weekend getaways together. Tell me why you've been lying to me for months. But she couldn't, or wouldn't. She sat there in her expensive suit, in our expensive house, surrounded by the expensive life we'd built together, and said nothing. I see, I said finally. Well, Miranda, since honesty seems to be in short supply around here, let me be perfectly clear about something. This isn't over, not by a long shot. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Miranda, you might want to be more careful about your digital security. You never know who might be paying attention. As I drove away, I saw her silhouette in the living room window, phone pressed to her ear. Calling Rachel, no doubt, to report on our conversation and plan their next move. Let them plan. They'd been playing chess while I thought we were playing checkers. But now I knew the rules of their game, and I intended to win. Janine's coffee shop of choice was a small place called The Grind, tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing boutique on Millbrook's main street. She was already there when I arrived at 8 the next morning, hunched over her laptop with a large coffee and what looked like half the contents of her law office briefcase spread across the table. My sister had always been the practical one in the Shaw family. While I was off playing soldier and then corporate climber, she'd quietly built a reputation as one of the most thorough paralegals in the state. If Janine said she had information, it was worth hearing. You look like hell, she said, without looking up from her screen. Good morning to you too, I replied, settling into the chair across from her. And yes, I feel about as good as I look. She finally raised her eyes, and I saw the concern there despite her matter-of-fact tone. Janine was 3 years younger, but had always acted like the older sibling, probably because she'd inherited all the family's common sense. So, she said, closing her laptop, you want to tell me what really happened yesterday? Because the version I heard through the legal grapevine doesn't sound like the Oliver Shaw I know. I gave her the abbreviated version, Miranda's betrayal, Rachel's promotion, the emails and photos I'd discovered. Janine listened without interruption, occasionally sipping her coffee, her expression growing darker with each detail. Son of a bitch, she said when I finished. I knew Miranda was ambitious, but this is next-level ruthless. You said you had information for me? Janine glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. Morrison and Associates handles Summit's corporate contracts, right? Well, yesterday afternoon, Miranda called requesting an emergency consultation about potential intellectual property disputes and employee confidentiality violations. My blood chilled. She's trying to build a case against me. That's what I thought too. But here's the interesting part. She specifically asked about spousal privilege laws and whether communications between married couples could be used in corporate litigation. She's worried about the emails. She should be, because there's more. Janine pulled out a manila folder. I did some digging through our corporate files. Summit Horizon Tech has been hemorrhaging money on their New England expansion. The quarterly reports they filed with the state show massive cost overruns and missed revenue projections. She slid a document across the table. But the reports they filed with their investors tell a completely different story. Rosy projections, ahead of schedule milestones, profits that don't exist. I scanned the papers, my logistics training helping me parse the financial data. This is securities fraud. Potentially. And guess who signed off on both sets of reports? Miranda. Miranda and Rachel. As of yesterday, Rachel has signatory authority on all regional financial documents. The implications hit me like a truck. Miranda hadn't just stolen my job and betrayed our marriage. She'd made Rachel complicit in what looked like systematic financial misrepresentation. There's more, Janine continued. I have a friend who works at the State House in the department that handles corporate licensing. Summit's expansion permits were fast-tracked through the approval process, which is unusual for a project this size. Someone greased the wheels. Someone with connections. Someone who knew exactly which palms to press and which regulations to sidestep. She paused. Someone like Liam Hart. I knew the name. Liam Hart was Summit's external legal consultant, a smooth operator who specialized in corporate expansion and regulatory compliance. He'd been at several company events, always impeccably dressed, always working the room with practiced charm. What's Hart's connection to this? He's the one who handled all the permit applications and regulatory filings. He's also been billing Summit for an unusual amount of consulting hours over the past 6 months. Hours that don't seem to correspond to any specific legal work. The pieces were starting to fit together. Miranda, Rachel, and Liam, a triangle of ambition and corruption that had used my own dedication against me. Janine, you're brilliant, I said. But why are you helping me? This could get messy. She smiled, the first genuine warmth I'd seen from her all morning. Because you're my brother, and because I've never liked Miranda. She always treated you like an accessory to her success story. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Jeff from IT. Heard you quit yesterday. Can we talk? I have something you need to see. I showed the message to Janine, who raised an eyebrow. Jeff Morrison? You know him? He does freelance IT work for our law firm sometimes. Quiet guy, but thorough. If he wants to talk to you, it's probably important. I texted back. The Driftwood, tonight at 7. Building your resistance network? Janine asked. Something like that. Miranda thinks she can intimidate me with lawyers and corporate politics. She forgot that I spent 10 years in the military learning how to plan operations. Janine gathered her papers and closed her briefcase. Just be careful, Oliver. Miranda's not just ambitious. She's desperate now. Desperate people do stupid things. Good, I said. Stupid things leave evidence. That evening, the Driftwood was busier than usual for a Wednesday night. The after-work crowd clustered around the bar, unwinding with beer and conversation. I found a corner booth and waited, nursing a Guinness and watching the door. Jeff Morrison arrived exactly at 7, a thin man in his early 30s with prematurely gray hair and the pale complexion of someone who spent too much time in front of computer screens. He spotted me immediately and walked over, carrying a laptop bag that looked like it weighed more than he did. Oliver Shaw? He asked, extending a hand. Jeff Morrison, Summit IT Department. Thanks for reaching out, I said as he settled across from me. What can I do for you? Jeff glanced around nervously, then opened his laptop. It's more about what I can do for you. See, I heard about what happened yesterday, and it got me thinking about some irregularities I've noticed in our system. He turned the screen toward me, showing what looked like network access logs. This is data from our corporate email servers. Notice anything unusual? I scanned the entries, looking for patterns. Someone's been accessing the system outside normal business hours. Not just outside normal hours. Someone's been systematically accessing employee emails, personnel files, and project documents without authorization. His fingers flew over the keyboard. The access patterns started about 6 months ago, right around the time Rachel Connors was hired. The timeline matched perfectly with when Miranda and Rachel's relationship began. Can you trace the unauthorized access? Jeff's smile was grim. Already did. The access came from 3 sources: Miranda's executive account, Rachel's user profile, and an external IP address that traces back to Liam Hart's law office. They've been spying on the entire company. Gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. Jeff pulled up another screen. They weren't just reading emails. They were copying files, downloading proprietary information, and transferring data to external servers. That's industrial espionage. At minimum. But here's the real kicker. Some of the files they copied contain employee personal information, social security numbers, salary data, performance reviews. That's identity theft territory. I stared at the screen, processing the implications. Miranda, Rachel, and Liam hadn't just betrayed me personally, they'd potentially compromised every employee at Summit. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Jeff's expression hardened. "Because 6 months ago I applied for a promotion to senior systems administrator. I was the most qualified candidate, had the best performance reviews, knew the systems inside and out. But somehow they decided to hire an external candidate instead. Let me guess. The external candidate had connections to Miranda or Rachel. Miranda's cousin, fresh out of college, no experience, but family connections trump competence, right?" Jeff closed the laptop. "I've been documenting these security breaches for months, waiting for the right moment to report them. And my resignation yesterday was that moment? Your resignation made it clear that Miranda's playing favorites and manipulating personnel decisions. Combined with the security violations, it paints a picture of systematic corruption." I leaned back in the booth, feeling the pieces of my revenge plan clicking into place. Miranda thought she'd won by stealing my job and my ideas. She had no idea that her own criminal behavior was about to become her downfall. "Jeff," I said, "how would you like to help me expose the truth about what's really happening at Summit?" His smile was sharp and hungry. "I thought you'd never ask." The annual Summit Horizon Tech Innovation Gala was Miranda's idea, her chance to showcase the company's success to investors, local politicians, and potential clients. Held at the Millbrook Grand Hotel, it was a black-tie affair that cost more than most people's annual salary, and served as Miranda's personal stage for corporate theater. I hadn't planned to attend, obviously, but that was before Jeff Morrison handed me the keys to Miranda's digital kingdom, and Janine provided the legal framework for what I was about to do. The invitation had arrived weeks ago, back when I was still the loyal husband and dedicated employee. Now, dressed in my best tuxedo and armed with a flash drive containing enough evidence to destroy 3 careers, I walked through the hotel's marble lobby like I owned the place. "Oliver!" The voice belonged to David Chen, Summit's CFO, a decent man who'd always treated me fairly. "I didn't expect to see you here. How are you handling everything?" "Better than expected," I replied, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. "Sometimes a change of perspective is exactly what you need." David looked uncomfortable. "For what it's worth, I thought you deserved that promotion. Your expansion analysis was brilliant." "Thank you. I'm glad someone appreciated the work." I sipped my champagne, scanning the crowd. "Have you seen Miranda? I'd like to congratulate her on the successful implementation of the regional strategy. She's over by the silent auction tables, I think, with Rachel and that lawyer, Hart." "Perfect. The entire conspiracy gathered in one convenient location." I made my way through the crowd, nodding to colleagues and clients, playing the part of the gracious loser. The hotel's ballroom was decorated in Summit's corporate colors, silver and blue, with elaborate floral arrangements and enough ambient lighting to make everyone look successful and important. I found them exactly where David had indicated. Miranda wore a stunning black evening gown that probably cost more than my car payment, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant chignon. Rachel looked equally striking in deep red silk, her dark hair cascading over one shoulder. Between them stood Liam Hart, tall and handsome in that practiced way of successful attorneys, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile perfectly calculated. They were deep in conversation, heads bent together like conspirators, which, of course, they were. "Miranda," I said, approaching with my most charming smile, "you look absolutely radiant tonight." She turned, her expression cycling through surprise, wariness, and finally settling on polite coolness. "Oliver, I didn't realize you were coming." Last-minute decision. I realized I couldn't miss the celebration of Rachel's innovative leadership strategy. I raised my glass to Rachel. "Congratulations on the promotion. Your presentation to the board was familiar." Rachel's cheeks flushed slightly. "Thank you. I'm excited about the opportunities ahead." "I'm sure you are." I turned to Liam, extending my hand. "Liam Hart, isn't it? I don't think we've been formally introduced. Oliver Shaw, former logistics coordinator." His handshake was firm, his smile professional. "Of course. Miranda's mentioned you. Sorry to hear about your departure from Summit. These things happen, though I have to say the timing was interesting. Right after the regional expansion permits were approved, that must have been quite a complex legal process." Something flickered in Liam's eyes. "Standard regulatory compliance? Nothing unusual?" "Of course not, though I imagine all those consulting hours added up quickly. 6 months of intensive work, if I understand correctly." The three of them exchanged glances, and I could practically see the alarm bells going off. They knew I knew something, but they weren't sure what or how much. "Oliver," Miranda said carefully, "perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." "Oh, I think here is perfect. After all, Summit's success should be celebrated publicly, don't you think?" I gestured toward the crowd around us. All these investors and clients, so interested in the company's ethical leadership and transparent business practices. Liam stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, I'm stating facts, like the fact that Summit's financial reports to the state don't match the reports filed with investors, or the fact that someone's been illegally accessing employee personal information and transferring it to external servers." The color drained from Miranda's face. Rachel's champagne glass trembled in her hand. "You're bluffing," Liam said, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my phone and opened the email app. "Am I? Because I have detailed server logs, financial documents, and a very interesting paper trail of permit applications that bypassed standard review processes." "You can't prove anything," Miranda hissed. "Actually, I can, and I will. Tonight." I raised my voice slightly, just enough for nearby conversations to pause. "In fact, I think everyone here deserves to know the truth about Summit's leadership." Rachel grabbed my arm. "Oliver, please, don't do this here." I looked down at her hand on my sleeve, then back at her face. "Don't do what, Rachel? Don't expose the truth? Don't reveal how you and my wife systematically stole my work, my ideas, and my career? Don't mention how you've been conducting an affair while committing corporate fraud?" The conversations around us had stopped entirely now. A circle of curious faces turned our way, drawn by the tension and raised voices. Miranda's mask finally slipped completely. "You bastard," she snarled. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." "I know exactly what I'm dealing with," I replied calmly. "I'm dealing with 3 people who thought they could destroy my life without consequences, who thought I'd just disappear quietly and let them get away with theft, fraud, and betrayal. Liam tried to salvage the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. Mr. Shaw is obviously dealing with some personal issues related to his recent employment termination. The only personal issue I'm dealing with, I said loudly enough for the entire room to hear, is deciding which federal agency gets the evidence first. The SEC for the securities fraud, the FBI for the identity theft, or the state attorney general for the corruption charges. The silence that followed was deafening. 300 of Millbrook's most prominent citizens stared at us, champagne glasses frozen halfway to lips. Conversations died mid-sentence. Miranda looked around wildly, realizing that her carefully constructed reputation was crumbling in real time. Rachel had gone pale as her red dress, her eyes wide with panic. Liam's practiced composure had evaporated, leaving him looking like what he was, a criminal caught in the act. "This isn't over," Miranda whispered. "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "It's just beginning." I finished my champagne, set the glass on a nearby table, and walked away, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their conspiracy. Behind me, I could hear the whispers starting, the questions being asked, the doubt spreading through the crowd like wildfire. By morning, everyone in Millbrook would know that Summit Horizon Tech's leadership was under investigation. By afternoon, the state and federal agencies would have copies of all the evidence Jeff and I had compiled. And by the end of the week, Miranda, Rachel, and Liam would understand exactly what it felt like to lose everything. 3 days after the gala, Summit Horizon Tech looked like a crime scene. FBI agents carried boxes of files from the building, while state investigators interviewed employees and local news crews filmed from the parking lot. The glass and steel monument to corporate success had become a symbol of corruption and betrayal. I watched it all from the driftwood, sitting at the bar with Troy and a growing crowd of locals who'd come to witness the spectacle. The morning news was playing on the television above the bar, showing footage of Miranda being escorted from the building in handcuffs. "Jesus," Troy muttered, refilling my coffee cup. "When you said you were going to expose the truth, I didn't think you meant you'd bring down the whole company." "I didn't bring down the company," I replied. "They did that themselves. I just made sure everyone found out about it." The news anchor's voice cut through the bar's chatter. "Federal investigators say the scheme involved systematic financial fraud, identity theft, and corruption of state regulatory processes. 3 individuals have been arrested, including CEO Miranda Shaw, Regional Director Rachel Connors, and attorney Liam Hart." My phone had been ringing all morning, reporters wanting interviews, former colleagues expressing shock and support, job offers from competitors who'd heard about my role in exposing the corruption. I'd turned off the ringer and let them all go to voicemail. There was only one call I was waiting for. It came at noon, from a number I didn't recognize. "Oliver?" The voice was Miranda's, but stripped of all its usual authority and confidence. She sounded exhausted, defeated. "Miranda, how's federal custody treating you?" "They let me make one phone call. I used it on you." "I'm flattered. Though I have to say, if I were facing 20 years in federal prison, I might have called a lawyer instead." A bitter laugh. "My lawyer is in the cell next to mine, remember?" I walked outside, away from the crowd and the noise, to the small deck behind the driftwood that overlooked Millbrook's harbor. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and dying leaves. "What do you want, Miranda?" "I want to understand why you did this. Why you destroyed everything we built together." The question hung in the air between us, carried by the wind off the water. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I didn't destroy anything," I said finally. "You did. The moment you decided to betray our marriage, steal my work, and commit federal crimes, you destroyed everything that mattered. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen? You were going to keep lying to me forever? Keep stealing my ideas and giving them to Rachel? Keep committing fraud until someone else caught you?" Silence on the other end of the line. Then quietly, "I loved you, Oliver. I still do. No, you didn't. You loved what I could do for you. You loved having a loyal husband who'd support your ambitions and never ask questions, but you never loved me. That's not true. If you'd loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me. If you'd loved me, you would have given me the promotion I'd earned. If you'd loved me, you wouldn't have been planning a future with Rachel while lying to my face every night. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. What happens now? I looked out at the harbor, where fishing boats bobbed at their moorings and seagulls wheeled overhead. The same view I'd been looking at since childhood, constant and unchanging, while everything else in my life had been turned upside down. Now you face the consequences of your choices, I said. The FBI has enough evidence to convict you on multiple felony counts. The state attorney general is pursuing corruption charges, and every employee whose personal information you stole is filing civil suits. And you? What do you get out of this? I get justice. I get vindication. I get to watch the people who betrayed me face the consequences of their actions. That's all? Revenge? No, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I get my life back. I get to start over, free from lies and manipulation and people who pretend to care about me while stabbing me in the back. Oliver, please, there has to be something. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately, but I turned it off and slipped it into my pocket. Whatever Miranda wanted to say, whatever last-minute plea or manipulation she was planning, I didn't need to hear it. I walked back into the driftwood, where the news was still playing and the crowd was still watching. Troy looked up as I approached the bar. Everything okay? Everything's perfect, I said, and meant it. The news had moved on to other stories, but I could see the aftermath of the morning's revelations playing out in real time. Text messages flooding phones, hushed conversations, the slow spread of information through a small town's social networks. By evening, everyone would know the full story. Miranda Shaw, the ambitious CEO who'd brought prosperity to Millbrook, was a criminal. Rachel Connors, the rising star who'd impressed everyone with her innovative thinking, was a thief and a fraud. Liam Hart, the smooth attorney who'd navigated complex regulations, was a corrupt fixer who'd sold his integrity for money and influence. And Oliver Shaw, the quiet logistics coordinator who'd been passed over for promotion, was the whistleblower who'd brought them all down. So what's next? Troy asked, pouring himself a beer. Job offers are probably pouring in after this morning's news. Probably. But I think I need some time to figure out what I actually want to do with my life. For the first time in years, I get to make that choice for myself. Any regrets? I considered the question seriously. 3 days ago, I'd been a married man with a steady job and a predictable future. Now I was divorced in all but paperwork, unemployed, and facing an uncertain tomorrow. No, I said finally. No regrets at all. The television above the bar flickered to a new story, something about local politics and municipal budgets. The Summit Horizon scandal was already becoming yesterday's news, though the legal proceedings would drag on for months. But for me, it was over. Miranda, Rachel, and Liam would spend the next decade or more in federal prison, their careers and reputations destroyed, their futures reduced to orange jumpsuits and supervised visits. I'd gotten everything I wanted, justice, vindication, and revenge served ice cold in front of the entire town. More importantly, I'd gotten something I hadn't expected: freedom. Freedom from a marriage built on lies. Freedom from a job that undervalued my contributions. Freedom from people who saw me as a tool to be used and discarded when convenient. I raised my beer in a silent toast to the future, uncertain, challenging, but finally, completely my own. Outside, the sun was setting over Millbrook Harbor, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new choices, new chances to build something real and honest. Tonight, though, I was content to sit in the driftwood, surrounded by friends and neighbors, watching the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The revenge was complete. The betrayers had been exposed, prosecuted, and punished. Justice had been served with mathematical precision and devastating effectiveness. And Oliver Shaw, the overlooked logistics coordinator who'd been dismissed as too comfortable in his current role, had proven that he possessed exactly the kind of vision and strategic thinking that executive leadership required. The irony was perfect, poetic, and absolutely satisfying. I finished my beer, said goodbye to Troy, and walked out into the crisp October evening. Tomorrow, I'd start planning my next move, considering job offers, deciding what kind of life I wanted to build from the ashes of the old one. But tonight, I was simply a man who'd fought for the truth and won.